Welcome to Module 5, Section 3, Ways to Effectively Communicate Student Progress to Caregivers. The objectives of this presentation are to identify how to prepare data to share with caregivers, recall how to establish two-way communication, and determine how to set the tone when in contact with caregivers. Communication is key when it comes to sharing students' progress with their caregivers. Edutopia reported that in 2006, 50% of participants in a survey of more than 1,000 K-12 public school teachers rated parental involvement in their children's education as inadequate. And a 2016 study revealed that some of the largest barriers to productive parent-teacher communication were trouble getting to school site, conflicting work schedules, lack of translation services, and consistent requests for donations or fundraising. Therefore, it is essential to search for a variety of ways to create lines of communication with caregivers. This section will cover how you can effectively deliver student progress using different digital software and approaches. Before we start the lesson, imagine yourself sharing a student's progress with their caregiver. How would you plan for it? What approach or technology would you use? If you can, discuss it with your colleague. After this lesson, we will come back to this question to reflect. Before communicating, plan and prepare data to share with caregivers. Where to start? Before communicating students' progress with caregivers, create student portfolios. You can do this by organizing students' work in a folder. Scan students' work so you can send it electronically. When talking about the student's progress to caregivers, you can refer to the student's portfolio. Next, develop a report template that will be sent to caregivers weekly. The weekly report template can be used for students that may need a little extra support. Include students' goals and academic standards. Here's a question for you. When communicating with caregivers about a student's progress, you can refer to a student's portfolio. True or false? The correct answer is true. Two-way communication ensures that both parties, the teacher and the caregiver, receives and send information. Two-way communication with caregivers is essential for the success of the student. Sometimes caregivers have trouble meeting the teacher in person due to work schedules or unavailability to get transportation. With today's technology, digital communication tools allow teachers and caregivers to form two-way communication without having to meet in person. Digital communication tools include email or messenger, video conferencing, online family portals, or social media classroom page. It is important to ensure that caregivers have access to the software and can know how to use them. In addition, make sure that caregivers are receiving information in their preferred language. This takes us to the next topic, closing the communication gap. Many caregivers do not receive their child's school information in their native language. Teachers can break the language barrier by using software tools such as Google Translate, ClassDojo, or Remind app to help with translation. In addition, we must consider breaking the technology barrier to close the communication gap. The Education Foundation of Palm Beach County reported that 25,000 families identified as not having access to the internet after making the shift to distance learning. Search for funded programs in your community that helps families learn how to use digital tools. Closing the communication gap is a step towards building a strong connection with caregivers and a step closer to student success. Fill in the blank. The correct answer is, with today's technology, digital communication tools such as email messenger, online family portals, video conferencing, and social media classroom page allow teachers and caregivers to form two-way communication without having to meet in person. Lastly, let's focus on setting the tone. When communicating with caregivers, always start with a positive note. Before the school year begins, create and send out a survey that asks caregivers to share a little bit about themselves and their child. Ask questions like, what are their expectations and goals for the coming school year? What are their child's strengths? What are their motivations? This allows you to create rapport from the beginning. When communicating with caregivers, provide positive and solution-based feedback. Refer to the student portfolio and the weekly report. Allow caregivers to share their perspectives. Caregivers are engaged when they feel like they are being heard. The Harvard and Family Research Project states to provide families with resources to enrich their child's learning and help them understand the best way to use their resources. These resources may include websites, activities, and lists of after-school programs. Giving families a variety of resources is helpful, but try not to overwhelm them with too many. Focus on those that are most relevant to their child's needs. Student success is dependent on how educators approach culture and diversity. Acknowledge and respect every student and caregiver, practice cultural sensitivity, and use community resources or reach out to funded programs. Educators that provide an inclusive environment for vast cultures allow caregivers and students to feel a sense of belonging and encourage parents to continue to engage. This means taking the step to use translating tools and reaching out to community providers. The Harvard and Family Research Project states, be sensitive to families' diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds and recognize that these can influence the way that you communicate with them. Ask parents and community liaisons or other staff about using culturally and linguistically responsive ways to connect with families. Here's a question for you. What are the different ways of setting the tone when communicating with caregivers? A. Build rapport from the start. B. Provide positive feedback and solution-based feedback. C. Let the caregiver share their perspective. D. Practice cultural sensitivity and use resources. E. Acknowledge and respect every student and caregiver. F. All of the above. The correct answer is F. All of the above. Now that you have completed this lesson, let's go back to the first question. Imagine yourself sharing a student's progress with their caregiver. How would you plan for it? What approach or technology would you use? How has your technique changed after taking this lesson? Share with your colleagues.